Well, all right. I'm here with Ben McDonald. Hi, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Good, good. So I'm just gonna kind of just start off and just
Dive into it?
Yeah, dive in.
Go
so, Ben, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So I run a wealth management firm called Destination Wealth. I host a podcast called the Anything But Typical podcast, where we interview business owners, business leaders. And then I've had businesses in the past, got a couple kids, got a whole bunch of things going on.
Yeah, kind of a whole shebang.
That's right. That's right.
Cool. Well, and you started entrepreneurship pretty early in life, which is something you don't hear about too often. It's very, different, especially in North Carolina. But were you around business owners growing up?
Yeah. So my dad and grandfather were both entrepreneurs. My dad was the very typical, struggling solopreneur where he would just change businesses every few years and wasn't ever a good boss. He just kind of created a bad job for himself.
Right.
And my grandfather was almost the opposite. So my grandfather was a German Jew and escaped the Holocaust over to Poland and flew over to America.
Oh my gosh.
And joined the army, went back, fought in the army overseas, and his money from the U.S. Army paid for the rest of his family to escape, kind of one by one. And then once the war was over, he moved to upstate New York and started a dairy farm when he had no money because all of his money went to getting the rest of his family out.
Right.
And turned nothing into one of the largest dairy farms in upstate New York and was ultra successful. So I was around both of them and I saw almost each side of my father spinning the wheels for years and years, and he's finally figured it out and has a great business now. And then my grandfather just being very diligent of chipping away and creating a really successful business from early on.
Right. Wow. I mean, that's wild.
Yeah, that story is, and it's a podcast episode by itself.
Right. I mean, it's very motivational though. I mean, is that something that kind of, led you to go within, because you have multiple businesses.
Yep.
So was that something that really drove you to go to your first business?
Yeah, I'm sure it did. I loved being around him early on. When I was 11 or 12 years old, he took me up to Canada to buy cattle with him. And so we'd wake up at 4 a.m. and go across the road and go to the cafe for breakfast and then just go farm hopping the rest of the day. But being around him really early on when I was younger and seeing what he was doing, and then the conversations in the car of how he was negotiating different things and building relationships was amazing exposure to have.
Right.
So I'm sure it led to my desire to start businesses at least. Yeah.
Right. And how many businesses do you have currently? Or
right
just,
now,
I guess
right
all
now
together?
right now it's only one.
Only one, okay.
I just sold the CrossFit gym a few months ago.
Okay.
So yeah, currently, there's some side ones. Technically, I guess you could count the podcast as a business, but we don't monetize it. So really, it's just a wealth management firm right now.
Okay. And then throughout your, entrepreneurship, how many businesses have you had, I guess?
I think 4 or 5.
4 or 5? Okay.
Three that were real that I saw through, and that I sold 2 of them and then have the third. And then a couple other just side things that I did for a little bit, made a little money and then stopped.
Okay. And tell us about your first business and starting that.
Yeah. So first one was called Status Pro Athletics. It
Okay.
was a basketball training business, which is obviously very different than what I do
Yeah.
now. I was 19 years old. I was a sophomore in college and I was playing 3 sports in college, but basketball was the main one. It was the one that I grew up enjoying the most. And I knew I wanted, what's that?
You were 19?
Yeah.
You were 19 years old?
Yeah, I was
my
a
gosh.
sophomore in college and literally coming back from marketing class and taking what I was talking about in class and putting it into a business plan. And I had no money at the time. So our family we always struggled for money, and then I was also a poor college kid. So I had no money at all. So I reached out to athletic directors and coaches and told them what I was trying to do and see if I could get them to send some of their kids to come join an AAU or basketball travel team program. And I went to Dick's Sporting Goods and I bought 6 basketballs that I left in the box in case nobody showed up, because I didn't have the money to pay for it anyway. So it's like, well, maybe I can return them and get the $150 back.
Right.
And then I paid a church $100 to rent it for a Saturday. And I just did a whole bunch of messaging on Facebook and looking up in the local newspapers of what players were doing well, and then trying to talk to their coaches, and just as bootstrap as you can be.
Right.
Like, the worst case scenario, I was out $100.
Right.
And fortunately, people showed up. And so I was able to have teams that first year and not make a lot of money, but net probably like $1,000 per team. And then I was able to get some of those kids to then do camps in the summer and in the fall to get ready for the next season. And then the year after, it just compounded. And so one thing led to the next. And then before you know it, I've got teams that are traveling the entire Northeast. I had a tournament that I was hosting. I was training professional players that were going to play overseas, and D1 players, and all this while I was like 19 to 22, 23.
Yeah, I mean that's alone, being 19 years old, and then like you said, going to 23 and doing that. I mean, I feel like just remembering being 19 and remembering, what little responsibility I had at 19. It's kind of unbelievable that, because that was just your first business. And you went on to do more and more and more things. Mm-hmm. Did you have, other than, being 19 and being young, what were some other hurdles that you faced?
Yeah, so age was definitely one of them, because especially that first year, I had juniors and seniors over the summer that were like a year or two younger than me. Mm-hmm. I played against some of the kids that I ended up coaching because the company was near where I grew up. So that was weird. You had a lot of parents that would question, like, should they be sending their kids to me and my program and that type of stuff.
Right.
I combated that by hiring my teammates, my college teammates, to be the coaches. So that way, all of these kids' dreams were to be able to go play college basketball. So the fact that one of my marketing pitches can be, you're getting coached and trained by current college basketball players, that certainly helped. So that was how I combated that one. I think the other big struggle was the finances of it all. Mm-hmm. When I say I had no money, I mean I had no money. The $100 that I spent and the $150 for the balls probably left me with like $100 or $200 in the bank account. I had $0 for me. So I needed to pay $400 to get a team into a tournament, and I needed to spend thousands of dollars to buy people's uniforms, and then I needed to rent the gym for practice. And
right.
I needed to figure out and get creative around that.
Right.
And so I just created the program to be in a way where parents, to sign their kids up, had to pay a certain amount. I think it was like half up front, and that was enough to float me to buy the uniforms and rent the gym for practice and get the entry fees into the first tournaments, things like that, and then get the rest of the money after that. And then also create a sponsorship program where you can have local companies sponsor your kid to pay for the entry, and then I would get the full check at one time. So I just needed to find ways to get money so I could literally fund this business that I was promising these kids what we were going to do.
Right. And then I can only imagine how the pressure that must have put on, like, putting it on yourself, I guess. Yeah. Right?
Yes and no. When you're a 19-year-old that has kind of always been a leader, and you're playing multiple sports in college and you're doing well in school, like, there's a sense of arrogance that I probably had, right? Probably less humility than what I have now. So it's almost like I just knew I was going to be fine. Mm-hmm. And there's something to be said for that ignorance of, like, I just know I'm going to do it. Right, exactly. So it's funny because looking back at it, I think the exact same thing of, like, okay, how was I fine doing what I was doing, mm-hmm. and putting myself out on such a limb of potentially failing?
Right.
But I think a lot of it was just like ignorant confidence.
Yeah. That's all we have at a young age. That's our hopes and dreams right there.
Yep.
Because I just know personally, like, being a business owner, it's hard to, once you're, like, faced with all these financial burdens, with all these, pressures of people relying on you, you know, at again such a young age, it's hard to overcome. I mean, how did you do that all on your own, you know?
Yeah, early on, especially with that first business, it was more about me staying in control and less about bringing other people in. So when I hired people, they were either interns or I was just paying them to coach an AAU season or things like that. And I think that helped because I didn't have that reliance of somebody was paying their bills through my business.
Right.
There was a lot of part-time people, a lot of friends that were just coaching or helping me train in the summer. So not having that pressure compared
having those
to
connections.
Yeah, that was huge, right? Versus today, I mean, families' livelihoods are on the line with the business I'm running.
Right.
And there's so much pressure to come along with that. So fortunately, I didn't do that. I put a lot more pressure on myself. Now, when you go to sell a business like that, that's a lot harder, right? Because I was a keystone in the company, meaning if I'm gone, the person who ended up buying the business, his biggest concern was, when you leave, will the company still be viable? So I had to do a whole bunch of things there to get somebody in place to be the leader of the company and train him up and things like that. But while I was running it, I didn't have that pressure, so that helped a lot.
Right. Well, and that's just one of your many successful businesses that you've had. You know, what made you decide to go from, you know, that one to several others?
I always thought my path was going to be, I was going to coach college basketball and I was going to be a college athletic director. So when I was running that business, I was also a high school athletic director. I was also getting my master's. There was a whole bunch. We can talk about that if you want to, but I was doing a bunch of things along that line. And then I sold the business because when you coach college basketball, you can't have that type of company because otherwise everybody would just run their own program and recruit their own kids.
Right.
So I had to sell the business if I wanted to coach at the college level.
Okay.
And coaching college basketball is the worst job because my first job it was a Division II assistant coaching job outside of Charlotte. And I got paid $10,000 plus I was able to eat at their cafeteria twice a day.
That's a plus.
Yep. And it was 90 hours a week all year round.
Okay.
It was absurd of just, I would get home from an away game at 2 a.m. and I'd be back in the gym at 6 o'clock training kids.
Right.
And you have to change jobs every year because I obviously can't just stay in a job like that. So you have to change jobs every year and try and move up the ladder a little bit. And that was not how I wanted to raise kids, of just dragging them around the country.
Yeah.
So when I had sold the first business, it was the first time I had money in my bank account and I was 24 years old. So you're either going to spend it or you're going to do something with it. So I started investing and I had studied business for undergrad. And so we studied a lot of that stuff, but this was the first real life application of it. And I saw the power of money working for me.
Right.
Right. Like you look at your account at the end of the day and it's higher than when it was at the start of the day.
Yeah.
And so seeing that, I dove more and more into it and the strategies and really enjoyed the power of what that could do. And so when I was looking at changing career paths, it was a pretty good worst case scenario to go the financial advising wealth management route because I, one, would love it and do well at it and that would be my career. Or two, I would hate it and I was 26 years old at the time and I could always change jobs.
Right.
And I would have learned a ton for myself.
Right.
So that was a pretty good worst case scenario. I was essentially getting a paycheck to learn more about investing. And it just worked out to be something that I enjoyed. It has a ton of correlations with coaching. So I was able to take that like empowering and strategy type mindset from basketball coaching and apply it to the finance world, which worked really well. Because most of my clients would make comments at the end of meetings of how it's the first time they actually understood what an advisor was talking to them about. And it's purely because I learned how to communicate in the sports and coaching world, talking to 16-year-olds, trying to get them to buy into a bigger picture, right? And I just apply those same things. So yeah, fortunately that worked and it just turned into the career path. Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, your whole first business alone just sounds like it was an incredible journey and an incredible, bridge to where you're at now.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun for a first business for sure.
Yeah.
Right. Cause I'm just in a gym all day long, which at the time was my passion. So I had a lot of fun with it.
Right. Well, and then would you still say like that being in the gym and being in that, lifestyle is still a passion of yours, if it's just maybe even a hobby or?
Yeah. So I had mentioned earlier I played 3 sports in college. You can't just shut that off.
Yeah.
At least I couldn't.
No.
So when I graduated, I started getting into CrossFit, and I just needed some sort of competitive outlet, and CrossFit was a lot of fun and I enjoyed it. And so I competed internationally for a few years and did some of the United States-based international competitions. And that was my competitive outlet as an athlete. And so I took that pretty seriously for a while I was running the other businesses. And it has gradually become more of a casual hobby.
Mm-hmm.
Now, casual for me is, there's things about me I'm a little off, right?
Yeah.
I love extremes. So casual for me is like, I'm going to sign up for a 50-mile race. Or I was talking to a buddy of mine that it's a swim run competition that is like a 12-hour race, or just absurd stuff. So I like doing that for challenges and a way to stay semi-competitive, but I don't take it nearly as seriously as what I used to.
Right. Well, and speaking of CrossFit, like what you said earlier, you did own a CrossFit gym, right?
I did.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Funny part about it, I bought the CrossFit gym in the same week that I bought the wealth management firm.
Okay.
Which was a terrible idea. Yeah, let's go and buy 2 businesses at the same time.
Yeah.
That was more of an opportunity, though. It was a buddy of mine that had run a CrossFit gym for about 7 years.
Okay.
And COVID hit. I think the
Right.
gym lost like 50% of its members. He was completely burnt out because he was doing everything himself and needed an ability to step back.
Mm-hmm. And
the part of me that works really well with this type of thing is I'm very good at the strategy of business.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, that can be applied to any industry. So I was able to buy that with a couple partners. They were the ones that ran the day-to-day. I helped with just business operations, outlook, how do we grow this thing and make it profitable. But the biggest thing was, it was just the business had been cut in half because of COVID. So it was a good chance for me to buy a business on sale,
Right.
structure it in a way that I was going to be fine, and pretty low risk. And then it grew 250%, I think, over 2 years.
Right.
And so then I sold it after that.
Right. So it just sounds to me like you quite literally have a million things happening in your life at all times since you were 19 years old. And even before we, got on this, you were telling me a little bit about the million things that you have going on. Can you elaborate a little bit?
From when I was younger?
Younger to,
Okay.
23,
Yeah,
whenever, honestly.
Yeah, so when I was 20, I think I was 21 or 20, no, I must have been 22. So I had the business. I was getting my master's. I was a varsity boys basketball coach at a high school, and I had become the athletic director at that high school at the same time. So I was doing all of those things all at once. Being an athletic director at 22 is really funny because I'm sitting there in a room of 65-year-olds that are just waiting for the meeting to end so they can go golf. And I'm trying to figure out the start of my career.
Right.
So yeah, that was really strange. But I've put myself in a lot of those situations of being the youngest person in the room. Yeah,
I was just gonna say, I feel like when I was in high school, I remember all the athletic directors being quite literally on their deathbed. So props to you for that.
Yeah, I was on my deathbed because I was doing too many things at once. But
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so we talked a little bit about your first company, your CrossFit company. Tell us a little bit about selling your first company and kind of how you thought about why you wanted to, anything that you'd like to really talk about with that.
One of the neatest feelings I've ever had was getting handed a check for something I started in my dorm room.
Right.
That was really cool. So I knew that I was going to move from New York somewhere down in the Southeast. And I didn't want to run a business from 12 hours away. I just don't think it would have been good enough for me to control a lot of the aspects of the player and parent interaction and all that. So I decided, all right, I'm going to try and sell. Well, I talked to my dad about that, and he laughs because he's like, you can't do that, right? You can't just go sell a business. That doesn't happen.
Right.
And I called two people that were competitors. They're in the same industry. They had their own companies, but friendly competitors. We would talk. I leaned on them early on in the first couple of years, asking their advice and stuff like that. So not really competitors. And first one didn't answer. And then I called the second one, and he answered and was interested. And I drove down to Scranton, Pennsylvania, where his business was, and sold the business to him.
Wow.
I messed up, meaning I didn't know all the ins and outs like I do today of the right way to value a business and things like that. So I definitely sold it for less than what I probably could have gotten for it, but it was as easy as it could have been.
Right.
I called two people, one answered, 2 meetings, and a few conversations later, he's handing me a check.
Right. Well, because I feel like when you think about starting a business, I just know me personally, when I think about starting a business, you kind of just expect that it's just going to be your business and your baby forever and ever. People don't really, think they would ever sell it. But I mean,
I've gone into each thing with the complete opposite mindset.
Yeah.
I have gone into each building it in a way that if I wanted to, I could sell.
Right.
And doesn't mean I'm going to. Even with the wealth management firm, it's going amazing. It's grown phenomenally. But if I ever wanted to sell, I would be able to.
Right.
And I think a lot of people shut themselves off of different options. They either are only going to sell, like that's their tunnel vision for that, or it's going to be a lifestyle business for them forever. And limiting yourself in what you can do,
right,
I think is a big mistake. And so
right.
Even with this first one, it was one of those that I knew eventually I would probably sell out of it.
Yeah.
And so I built it in a way that I was going to be able to.
Well, and I feel like the selling of your first company is kind of what transitioned you to go from, basketball to investments.
Yep.
So, two very different things to me.
Yeah.
So how did you kind of go from basketball to investments in that mindset? And, and I guess we can go ahead and lead into talking about Destination Wealth as well.
Yeah, that's fine. So the transition from basketball to wealth management was what we had talked about earlier with the coaching and not wanting that to be the lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And so I was really looking for where can I go do something that I enjoy doing, that I also can get paid to learn an entirely new industry, and then where can I go where I'm going to actually be trained and supported to do it. Mm-hmm. So that was definitely the transition and leapfrogging from one career to the next. And I, other than not knowing who I was going to sell the business to, I've done pretty much everything in business at as low of a risk as possible. So even like the first one, keeping as early on of keeping those basketballs in the box, to how I've structured different deals of like purchasing the gym and purchasing the wealth management firm, or going from one industry to the next. I did not want to ever put myself out on a limb where all of a sudden I'm homeless and don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
So even on that, there were lots of boxes I needed to check. I needed financial stability. I needed support. I needed the right training. There were lots of things that I needed before I was actually going to make the jump. So I'm pretty intentional there. But then once I'm going to make a jump, once I make a decision and everything's lined up, then I'm 100% there. I'm full steam ahead at that point.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, that just sounds like a whole lot of
a whole lot of a lot.
Of a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you wouldn't mind, definitely going into Destination Wealth and kind of just everything that you want to speak about it. How you ended up getting there and everything.
So I was at Edward Jones, and I was just an employee. And you can probably guess this, I am a horrible employee because I can't do it.
As most entrepreneurs are.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So leadership in the company, the local leadership that oversaw me, hated me because I was doing things that I knew were good strategies, but they weren't the old school strategies that they were used to.
Right.
So when you do things differently, the people with the older school mentality
They can't
don't
handle
like
it.
Right. Yeah.
At
yeah.
all.
So I'm a terrible employee, but I was there. Unfortunately, I had enough autonomy to grow my own office, and I turned around an office and things like that. But it got to a point where I was ready to leave, and I
Right.
knew from day one I was going to eventually leave and own my own.
Sorry.
Nope, you're fine. But yeah, so I knew at some point I was going to leave and start my own firm.
Okay.
There was never a scenario where I was going to be working for somebody else for my entire career.
Right.
It was just a matter of when and what. And so I was running the podcast, Anything But Typical, and one day after a podcast, I told Gary Fry, my co-host, what I was thinking about and that I was going to leave. I was going to start my own firm, all this stuff. And he interrupted me and said, stop for a second, because the CPA firm that he's the head of their business development, they had a fledgling wealth management firm that they got just through an acquisition of a CPA. And he said, it's been sitting here for years. It only has like $5 or $6 million in it, and nobody feels comfortable referring to it because there's nobody at the helm. And so he was like, why don't I connect you with Adam Boatsman, the managing partner of BGW CPA? They're the ones that had the firm, and see if there's something there. And he's like, and if there's not, you can go do your own thing, and that's great. But I think there's a way to correlate where you can come in and take this over and have it be a partnership. And fortunately, that interaction happened, because it turned into an unbelievable situation where I was able to come in, take over the firm, have it be its own separate business, but have the partnership with the CPA firm. So you have built-in referral sources, you have support. Adam has been amazing because he's years ahead of me on the path, and he has built a really successful business and is the managing partner. So I can lean on him for advice. So it just had a lot of things that I was looking for, because I'd always done everything on my own, right? Status Pro was my own, at Edward Jones, it was my own thing. And I was ready to be a part of something bigger than myself.
Right.
And if I were just gonna go start my own firm again, there's a good chance it could have been a lifestyle business and I make good money, but don't grow it into what I'm doing today. And so having that almost built-in mentor, having partners, having a bigger vision was what I wanted and needed at that time.
Right.
So that interaction led to me taking over Destination to a little over 2 years ago.
Okay. Well, and I think, when people look at you and people look at Destination Wealth, they only see the surface, right? So what are some things that, knowing what you know now, mistakes that were made, things that you would maybe do differently, if there's any? There might not be.
There's
any.
always mistakes.
Yeah.
People may not want to talk about them, but there's always mistakes. No, I love talking about mistakes and lessons learned along the way, because if you're not learning from those trip ups, you're just going to stay in the same place or go backwards, right? So I certainly had a few. I went in with some blinders on of, you get so excited about something, right, that you think everything is going to be great. You're just looking through the rose-colored glasses. So little things of the partnership and the dynamic, that it was a bigger uphill battle to get things in place and figured out ahead of time. And then one of the bigger mistakes was I hired one of my best friends at the time to be my chief operating officer. And it was one of those situations where he was over at the house, and my front yard's like 190 yards. So we made cocktails and we're hitting golf balls and just talking. And again, it goes into the, you dream and you think everything's going to be amazing, but in reality, it was way too early to bring somebody like him on. And so he's trying to almost drag this company along, right, and keep it growing and do the things that he was brought in to do. And I'm pulling the other direction because I know the thing. Another mistake I made was hiring my one of my best friends at the time as my COO, and it was on me. It was one of those situations. He was over at the house. and my front yard's 190 yards. So we got our golf clubs out and we were hitting golf balls and drinking cocktails and talking, and you start dreaming, right? When you're in that type of situation. And it wasn't the right time to bring somebody like that in. He came in ready to do the things that he was supposed to do, right? And wanted to just pull this company along and grow it and get it going. And I was almost pulling the other direction because there's things that have to happen in a regulated industry. I wanted to get the foundation of the company in place, things like that. And I just set us up for failure, that I brought somebody like that in at the wrong time. There weren't enough, the finances weren't in the right spot to bring somebody like that on and really have him get paid what he deserved. And so unfortunately it led to him having to leave the company and things like that, because it just didn't end up being the right fit.
Right.
So that was a mistake for sure.
Right. Well, and speaking of which, what is your opinion? I mean, would you ever hire another friend or family member?
Yeah.
again?
No, I mean, so even him, for example, like he's phenomenal at what he does. And I think you just need to know the company that you have, the people that you're bringing in, and then you need to set all of the dynamics beforehand. It wasn't the right time. Doesn't mean that it wouldn't have worked out, right? Like it could be years from now when somebody like him or him, right, could be in the company and it could be amazing. But there's a risk to it of if it's friends or family that you could ruin a relationship from that.
Right.
And I mean, I've heard plenty of stories on my podcast. There have been multiple stories of people that they lost friendships, lost marriages, all that. So it's not that I'm against it, because I think there's a time and place for it. And I think sometimes people can be the right fit. It takes a lot of self-awareness. You need to know yourself really well. The other person needs to know themselves really well. And if you can complement each other and have a mutual level of respect, and it's the right time and the company's in the right place, then I think you absolutely can make it successful.
Right. Well, and I feel like a lot of people, like, this is, a whole different podcast again, but I think a lot of people, they can't see the fine line between, just being friends or family and being an actual, like you're an actual business and a company that needs to be run.
Yeah, for sure. And so for a lot of people, it probably doesn't make sense to ever hire friends or family.
Right.
Because if you can't mix it, and maybe not even you, right? Maybe the other person can't mix it, then it's going to end up as a failure. It's going to ruin relationships, things like that. So it's not a never, right? I think there are times where it makes sense, but you're completely right. There's lots of times where it doesn't make sense.
Well, and I think it also just depends on, the person, their skills. Like, I mean, hiring a friend and family, are you hiring them just because they're friends or family?
Well,
do they have the actual skills? Yeah, you should never do that.
If you're hiring somebody just because they're friends and family, then it's almost always a mistake.
Yeah.
If anything, you need to hire them despite them being friends and family.
Right.
You need to think like this is such a good situation and such a good fit that you're willing to take that extra risk of it being a family member or a friend.
Right. Well, and speaking of friends and family, we've heard a lot about Ben, the entrepreneur, the businessman. Who is Ben as just a human being? Like, what are some, of your hobbies? You have 2 children, right? Tell us a little bit about what it is that you like to do, and what it is you like to do as a person. Like,
yeah, no, that's fine. So, I mean, first off, being a father is amazing. So my daughter's 7.5, my son's about to be 5. And they're completely different personalities, which is great. My daughter's like a mini me. But it's been a ton of fun exploring with them. And what it's done is I play more and joke around more than ever before. Because I was the 8-year-old that was out in my backyard practicing baseball because everything was the most serious thing in the world. Like I never just played.
Right.
And so seeing life through my kids' eyes has made me more fun, more relaxed, enjoy life more, play more, care less about what other people think, those types of things.
Right.
So that's been a huge change in my life, of having them around and all the things that they've taught me.
Right.
Don't get me wrong, they're still little kids. You still want to wring their necks sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, that has been unbelievable. Fitness has always been a big thing. I just love doing different challenges, or even just getting out and going for hikes or going for a bike ride or swimming or whatever it is. I just like to move. That's a lot of fun. Poker has always been a big part of my life. I had a dead time in Status Pro in my first business in the fall every year. And I treated it as I was a semi-professional poker player for that like 2 months, where I would go to a casino 3 times a week and treat it like a job. And so I've been playing poker real early on. I've played in the World Series, things like that. So that's a hobby. I love doing tournaments around here. So I like doing that. I've got 7 acres. And so like last year I had lambs and ducks, and I'm going to build an orchard on the property and want to get animals again and things like that.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Well, growing up around my grandfather and being around a 400 head dairy farm, you learn a lot, and the interaction with animals is unbelievable. So I want to be able to give that to my kids.
Right.
But I'm also running a multi-million-dollar business, right? I can't be a full-time like farmer.
Yeah.
So
just gonna give up everything and just go out and just be a farmer.
Yeah, that's right. So I'll use Pinterest for what tattoos I wanted to get and tattoo designs and clothes I want to wear, and then farming stuff.
Yep.
So I've learned a lot of.
All you need.
Yeah, that's exactly
all
right.
you need is clothes, tattoos, and farming. You're
Perfect.
good.
So doing that will be a lot of fun. And I want to get back to having animals on the property again. It's just running the business and doing the acquisitions I had going on this year obviously didn't make sense. So I put a pause on that.
Right. Well, and I think people, when they see you and they see your company and they just see entrepreneurs in general, like people who work like 9 to 5s, for instance, they're like, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur because, I want the freedom of making my own schedule and, but still having a life and outside of work. So how long would you say, like, what are your work days throughout the week?
Yeah.
Like, what would you say?
So one of the things I am very adamant about is that business owners should not create a bad job for themselves. You might as well just go work a 9 to 5 if you're going to run yourself into the ground otherwise.
Right.
I'm huge on the mindset of my business should be serving me. I should not be a slave to my business. So I purposely don't work nearly as much as what most business owners do, but it looks very different. It could be, hey, the kids have gymnastics Mondays at 5:30, so I'm going to stop work early and I'm going to go there. And maybe once they're in bed and it's 8, 9 o'clock, I'm getting my laptop back out and I'm working for an hour. Or I wake up early and I was in the office last week, I think Thursday or Friday, at like 7 in the morning. My schedule just looks different, but it's flexible, where I can work really early or really late, or I can get a workout in the middle of the day. But I love the idea of the business serving me. Like I said, not me being a slave to the business. And I wish more entrepreneurs would do that.
Right.
And if they are working 70 hours a week, and not to say you don't do that at the start, right? There's something to be said for you have to put in work, especially early on before you can hire other people to replace yourself. Like, you absolutely have to put in work to get something off the ground. I heard an analogy once of getting a business or a career off the ground is like an airplane taking off. You're burning, and I don't remember the number, but you're burning like 40% of the fuel just to get in the air. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing in running a business. Mm-hmm. Just to get the business viable, that's going to take up half of your energy. After that, you should be able to create a life that fits what you want.
Right.
And for some people, that is 70 or 80 hours a week, and you're hustling all the time and you're trying to grow it as quickly as you possibly can. Other people, it's a lifestyle where they're working 20 hours a week and they're just making the money that they're happy with, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. I'm somewhere in between. I want the ability to go travel or take time off, or, like I said, get workouts in the middle of the day. But I also want to run a large company.
Right.
And so I have to strike that balance between the two.
Right. Well, and I think that's something that people forget about when they all of a sudden want to up and quit their 9 to 5. Because personally, I would not want a 9 to 5. I would want to have my own business and do that if I have, if I can, and I can. But I think that's something people forget when wanting to be an entrepreneur or wanting to have their own business is you do have to use that 40% and get it actually off the ground. A lot of people, they think about having their own business and they think that it's just a breeze.
They see the highlight reels.
Yes.
Yeah.
They go and
that's what it is. You see the good and not the bad.
Yep.
And
see
so
what you want to see.
Right. So when you're going into a business, you think everything is going to be amazing, and maybe it will be eventually. But how many people are running businesses that should be the number 2 or the number 5, right? Like the number 50 at Facebook did a hell of a lot better than most entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
You don't need to be the number 1 person in a company, and most people aren't. Most people are not the visionary, I'm going to build this picture type thing, and that's completely okay. But that goes back to, we were talking about self-awareness earlier. I think that's a superpower. And if you can figure out who you are and where you fit, if you want to be in the startup type culture, but you know that you shouldn't be the founder and CEO or whatever, then that's great. Go find a startup that has 7 people working for them and find where you fit in. And for other people, if it is you're the person that's going to start the company, you need to know what it takes to do that, right? What does it take to get the airplane off the ground?
Right. I 100% agree. And I think, to finish up everything, I think with even in Charlotte alone or in North Carolina alone, I see so many small businesses, people that are, they make, little chairs for squirrels and they go and take them to the, flea market and sell them. So people that literally take nothing and turn it into something, they want to know from successful businesses such as you and yourself, for people starting out in business, what is some advice that you would like to share with them?
So the self-awareness piece is massive. Know what you want to do. So Gary and I, Gary Fry, my co-host, he and I talk a lot because he takes business owners through something called Thrive Wither. And it's really simple. It's just you create a T-chart on a piece of paper, you write Thrive on one side and Wither on the other, and you take 30 minutes of uninterrupted time and write down what are the things that make you come alive or thrive, and what are the things that suck your energy. And what the trap most people fall into is they're going to write things they're good at and things they're bad at. And what you'll end up finding when you look at Thrive Wither instead of strengths and weaknesses is you could be very good at something and you hate doing it. And that's completely fine. But there are a lot of people that will go and do a business because they're good at something and then they realize they don't enjoy doing it. So if you figure out what are the things you love doing and what are the things that you hate doing, that allows you, as you're building your business and also building your team, who should you be hiring? What are the things that you want to replace? So you're, as the leader, you can slowly start replacing your Wither list with people that's in their Thrive list and they're coming around and now you're complementing each other. So the self-awareness piece, taking the time to reflect is big. When I was deciding to take over Destination Wealth or go a different route, I took 4 days in the mountains, completely secluded, just a solo trip. I just hiked. It was during a meteor shower, so I'd get up in the middle of the night and watch the meteor shower and do a fire one night and write and listen to music, like a complete just self-retreat. And it was to take the time to really figure out what I wanted this to look like. And by the time that was done, I had the exact picture. I created the puzzle and knew exactly what it was going to look like. So that self-reflection, self-awareness, I think is really important. The second part is ego. You find a lot of business owners that have such an ego, they will hire people that are worse than them because they feel like they need to be the best people in their own business, right? Because if you have an employee that's better at you or better than you, then that's not the way the hierarchy should be, which I think is completely false. Right. I want to surround myself with people that are better than me at one or two specific things. So like my portfolio manager is unbelievable in that world. Is he going to design the vision for the company and things like that? No, not at all. But he doesn't need to, because that's where I'm really good.
Right.
So I need people like him around me to be a part of my company and a part of my team. And then we can complement each other. And now we have a team of rock stars instead of one person on top that's the best at everything and a bunch of people underneath that really shouldn't be a part of the company.
Right. Right.
So I think that's a big part too.
Right. Well, perfect. Well, I mean, that's all that I have on conversation pieces with you. So, I mean, if there's anything else that you think your listeners should know.
Yeah, no, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you doing this. I'm still, the last thing I'll say is I'm still figuring this out also, right? And everybody is. And
I think people are like probably watching this like, he's perfect.
Right, and it's not that way at all. I'm trying to figure out things nonstop, and it's a constant growth and evolution. And so again, from the outside in, it can sound great, right? I went from $6 million to $500 million in 2 years. That's absurd growth.
Yeah.
And it is. And I'm extremely proud and happy of what we've done. But that was not a smooth sailing couple of years, right? And just because we're here doesn't mean the struggles go away.
Right.
So there's still mistakes I'm making all the time. There's still things I'm trying to figure out. And that's okay. That's how I'm going to keep getting better. And the day that I stop doing that is probably the day I should stop being a business owner.
Right.
Because if I'm not constantly growing and learning and improving, then I'm doing a disservice to all of my clients, all of my employees. So that would be the last thing is never think that you're at the point where you can be content and just sit back on your laurels. Keep growing, keep learning, keep expanding yourself, and great things will come.
Some great words of encouragement from Ben McDonald. Well, thank you so much, and I'm sure we will be doing this again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.